Hello there, and welcome to today's webcast, Helping Residents Make the Shift to Digital Government. I'm Todd Sander, Vice President of the Center for Digital Government, and I'm excited to serve as the host for today's webcast. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next hour. Before we dive into the content, I want to share a few brief housekeeping notes. We've designed this webcast to be interactive, and you can participate in Q&A with us by submitting your question using the Q&A widget. Send in your questions as they come up throughout the presentation, and we'll address as many of them as possible during the Q&A portion. You can also increase or decrease the size of your media player and slides windows. We will email a recording of this presentation to all registrants within 48 hours. Please use the recording for your reference, or feel free to pass it along to colleagues using the share widget in the console menu. At the close of the webcast, we'll encourage you to complete a brief survey about the presentation. We'd like to hear what you think. If you're unable to stay with us for the entire webcast but would like to complete the survey, simply click the survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will automatically pop up as soon as the webcast concludes. Currently, we recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers, and if you're experiencing any media player issues or have any other technical problems, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the help button at the bottom of the console. Joining me today to discuss the topic are Bruce High, former CIO of Harris County, Texas. Bruce served as the Executive Director of Universal Services and CIO of Harris County from 2009 to 2020. Harris County, Texas is the third largest county government in the United States, serving the needs of over 4.2 million citizens, covering a 1,780 square mile area and 270 locations. It's roughly Houston and all that makes up Houston. Also joining us is Gene Noble, Senior Vice President of Operations at PayIt. Gene Noble is a highly accomplished operations leader known for implementing transformative processes that drive universal adoption and operational excellence. With a wealth of experience, Gene has a proven track record of success in enhancing performance and delivering exceptional customer experiences. As the Senior Vice President of Operations at PayIt, Gene leads the operations and customer success teams, ensuring a strong focus on meeting client needs and driving high-level performance. Okay, let's get started. As I said, we have an exciting discussion planned for the next hour, focused on one of the most important issues facing state and local government. That is, how can government meet the service delivery expectations of constituents that are largely formed by their online consumer experiences? When people go online to conduct a transaction, they expect to quickly find what they need, easily provide any necessary information, and conveniently and securely provide payment information. While world-class companies have found a way to make this seem easy to provide, it's still often a challenge for state and local governments. We're going to spend the next hour discovering how you can overcome that challenge. To provide a little context and government perspective, I want to share some recent Center for Digital Government research with you that's highlighted a few of the priority issues and challenges that state and local governments are facing. Executive leaders tell us that they're focused on expanding, simplifying, and improving services to residents and businesses, better coordinating cross-departmental programmatic response to crisis, improving economic development opportunities by making it easier to do business with government, and improving citizen engagement and restoring trust in government. Information technology professionals in government tell us they're responding to these executive priorities by focusing on improving systems and processes to create a more seamless resident engagement experience, staffing support functions appropriately with a mix of permanent employees and industry partner support, and modernizing legacy technology to simplify support, improve security, and meet the expectations of residents and staff. All those things, they're all things that touch on meeting citizen experience expectations in digital government. Our panelists today have a wealth of experience to share with us and will be able to give us both the government insider perspective of a former CIO and the industry partner perspective that is informed by helping many government organizations transform the way they think about constituent engagement and deliver services that meet and exceed expectations. I'm going to begin by asking Jean to share some of what she's learned as an industry partner working with governments across the country with us. So Jean, what are you hearing from governments you speak with about constituent digital expectations?
Sure. So I think the biggest theme that we hear across our clients is that people want to be reached where they are. They want to be able to reach their government in the way that they are comfortable, whether that means being in person, whether that means online or on the phone. They want to have these various touch points in the way that they're comfortable, and they want the experience to be consistent and make sense. I think, something that we had spoken about before was all of these channels don't always talk to each other, right? So you might have a web portal that has one experience where someone can log in, put in their information, and get a response back. And then they might call and talk to someone who doesn't know that they logged in and made a payment. And so that's where technology really bridges the gap. And I think, Todd, in your intro, you really teed up that technology isn't everything, right? There's a change management element of this where, the people involved in not only supporting these channels, but the people who are using them have to adapt to the way that it's functioning. Something that we see is, consumers expect to interact and get their services, whether it's with government or someone else, in that really modern way. Whether it's Amazon, whether it's Starbucks, people are used to logging in on their computer or their phone and having the system kind of know who they are and really kind of give them the information that is relevant to what they're trying to achieve. The Starbucks example really hits home for me just because there's one not too far from my house, and I know I can sit on my couch. It knows the kind of drink I want, and then by the time I get there, it's done, right? And that's the kind of experience that we see consumers expecting. If they don't have a consistent experience across channels, it begins to call into question the credibility. It maybe degrades the trust a little bit in the way that the government is supplying the information. And I think we all have learned that the breakdown in how this information is served can be as simple as the timing of a flat file, right? Something that is supplying data to a consumer experience. If it's not configured in the right way, or if the timing isn't quite right, that's going to change the experience for the consumer. And we just experience their expectation that it's correct every time. Something that we teed up in the problem statement was just that different constituents want to reach their government in different ways. So we work with leading governments across the continent in North America who have this no wrong door policy where they want to make services available in any way that makes sense for a resident. There are demographics who are much more comfortable on the phone. And there are, underbanked communities that maybe would be much more comfortable in a cash environment. And so, we really seek to meet those residents where they are. I think 24/7 is another element of this where we really can kind of bridge this divide where there are audiences that are not going to be able to make it to the government office between 8 to 5, right? And they might need to go make a cash payment in a place that is open 24/7. And so really enabling that kind of no wrong door approach means having multiple channels that talk to each other and that have the connectivity that are needed in order to have that seamless experience. On the agency side, there are also all kinds of other requirements that are needed as we look towards the future, right? The cybersecurity element, the PCI element, all of these things are so critical. And as users' expectations expand in terms of the kinds of features and services that are available to them, we really have to kind of leave behind the custom building of, okay, we need a user interface and we need the compliance and having to rebuild every time. I think we have found much easier to, deploy a platform that has configurable components that, when one agency needs something and that problem is solved, that problem can be solved across other agencies as well. And so that's the approach that we have taken to have that no wrong door policy. And I think we're excited to talk about it a little bit more.
Great. Thank you for that and for setting that context. Bruce, I want to talk to you a little bit now, more specifically about your experience in Harris County. So what were the expectations of the people in Harris County, and were you able to balance meeting those with their expectations that are set by the private sector?
Well, it's a work in progress, as always. In 2009, departments had their own sites, and they provided static content. But of course, the constituents demanded the ability to get to the information that they needed and conduct the transactions necessary for them to do business with Harris County. There was a lot of obstacles in the way. I mean, I'll say it. There was politics involved, and politicians that were set in their way. We heard a lot of "this is the way we've always done it," and we've made a lot of progress in that area by instilling the trust with the constituents to understand that we are having a better understanding what their needs are, so we could provide, get them to the information they need and get them to be able to conduct the transactional business that's necessary. During this transition, we also went from a lot of hosting our own stuff to a software as a service. Of course, the way that we got money back then, you got capital money for your infrastructure, and now we had to convince the people that hold the purse strings that we're going to services. And the services is the way to go because they bring the best business practices and focus on those types of needs while we get the data the way it needs to go and the integrations necessary.
So what were some of the benefits that you saw moving from a capital intensive approach to an as a service structure?
Well, it allowed the technology, the technicians, the CIO, our department to focus on enabling the business and allowing the business to do what they do best. And by working with the service providers, it allowed us to get the information to the customer in a timely manner that was accurate in what they were looking for.
Great, thanks. So now we have a little poll for you, those of you in the audience. We'd like to find out a little bit more about where you are on your digital government journey. We've heard from Jean kind of what happens or what she's hearing nationally from across the country. We've heard a little bit from Bruce about just how things were in Harris County and how things are going there. So take just a moment and let us know where you are in your journey. Are you just learning? Are you starting to plan for it? Have you implemented some of it? Maybe struggling with some of the things still that Bruce was talking about? Are you far enough along that you're really starting to enjoy the benefits? Or do you feel like you're at the point now where you really have this pretty well figured out and you're setting the standard, you're in a position to help others be more effective in implementing digital government in their jurisdictions? Take just a few more minutes here and let us know where you are. All right. Last call for the poll. Okay. All right, let's see where everybody is. So we've got 8.7% are just learning, 13 have started planning, about half are implementing, and 26% enjoying the benefits. That's great. And we've got a small percentage who feel like they're in a position to really be taking advantage of this and maybe even helping others. What do you think about that, Jean? Does that surprise you, or is that about what you would expect?
I mean, I think everybody is on the journey, right? I think implementing is a big word that could mean a lot of things, just in that it might be that we're implementing new things every time, right? I think the folks who are setting the standard, there are certainly some really incredible leaders across the country that just make a huge difference every day. And so it doesn't surprise me that we have a cohort from that group. I think I am always impressed by just the civil servants who are committed to making these services more accessible and a better experience for their residents. And I think those that do certainly see the benefits. They certainly see the outcomes that they're looking for.
Great. So the next question I want to ask you really has to do on how these systems are designed. And if you could tell us a little bit about how human-centered design can be applied to create a logical and fully integrated platform approach to service delivery, I think that would be helpful, because you talked before about the difference in preference, the difference in experience, the difference in people's ability. How can we account for that in these systems?
Sure. So, we saw a question in the chat about, talking more than just about payment. And I think human-centered design is the perfect kind of bridge to that question, which is any experience interacting with your government needs to make sense for the user. And so human-centered design is the approach that we take, where we really kind of embody that experience that a user would have. We empathize with the problem that the user is trying to solve, whether they're trying to apply for assistance, maybe they're applying for a license, maybe they are trying to pay a bill, right? Depending on what that experience is, there is an empathy element of this. And I think with a lot of government services, there are certainly people who absolutely need help, and things that historically may have been more complex, PDFs with legal jargon that had to be filled out, creating that experience that can be consumed at any level, whether people are incredibly digitally savvy, or whether, there are certainly people who are not going to adopt in an environment where there is strong legal language that is confusing or causes friction in the experience. And so, we're blessed to have a really incredible product design team whose full role is really understanding what the user is going through, and just kind of exploring different options. We have some, prototyping sessions where we'll have, users who are willing to try new product come on and click through, and we can kind of see how they're interacting with the product. And then, we can iteratively roll that out and see how it impacts users, whether it's, making their experience more, clear to them. Maybe it's making it faster. There are all kinds of objectives that you can pursue. And so the human-centered design element also takes in several factors of data. So not only are we observing our users, but we're also assessing the data that we have from what's in market today. And so that ongoing cycle of always improvement makes a huge difference in just always knowing kind of where those friction points are, and as we solve them, getting better and better each day.
Great. So Bruce, why don't you tell us a little bit, where did you see the most friction in the process of new system adoption? Where did things tend to bog down or hang up?
Well, from internally, and when I say internally, countywide, it was helping the elected officials and department heads understanding the benefit that and understanding that our customers our constituents are coming in to conduct their business. And while they want the politicians want their names out there to be representative that you just paid your child support and the county clerk thanks you for doing that, we had to show them that we can send them an email from them thanking them for conducting their business or doing their transaction. From a constituent standpoint, it's just like you're saying, Gene. It's understanding what they're looking for without going and knocking door to door. It's nice that what you bring in best business practices and understanding what constituents are looking for. It changes by every 5 miles, I'm sure. We have folks that still go to the library to connect to the computer to conduct their business here at Harris County. We have folks that are still dialing in with their telephone modems to connect. And there's that fine balance of how much do you push up front to get them the information you want to know, or get them into the systems and the transactions that you want them to do, as opposed to what they really want to come and conduct and how they want to conduct business.
So Bruce, if left to their own devices, do you think government typically spends enough time thinking about human-centered design? Is that something that's understood and talked about regularly?
Well, yes. I still work for an elected official right now, and most of their input is their concerns are how we conduct the transactions and the ability to get to information. I think it'll always be there because we don't understand every individual and what they want to do. But when we get a tool that allows us to know that, and this is probably dating me, Herman Munster lives at 1313 Mockingbird Lane. What does that mean? He has 4 people that can vote, and that's important to us. He loves pickleball, and we need to have a better understanding of that, and being able to get the information necessary for him to come in and conduct the business for his family and every other person that lives on the street.
Yeah, Bruce, your commentary on the kinds of personas that we identify in this process is really resonating. I think there was a question in the chat about representation across the groups who test the product, and it's certainly critical that that representation is incredibly diverse and represents the different audiences, just like you mentioned, where there are different socioeconomic groups, there are different demographics, there are different languages, there are all kinds of ways that a persona can come to life that is interacting with their government. And so really identifying and making sure that we do have a very diverse set of personas that are covered is a critical part of the process.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on a little bit to, we talked about the human factors here, the human-centered design. Let's talk a little bit more about the technology. How does the application and integration of APIs support a more elegant user experience?
Sure. So I think, when I mentioned earlier the experiences many of us have had, I think, where we go to a website and maybe it doesn't have the same information that someone in the office might be able to give us. I think that, of the past, we had all of these back office systems that didn't speak with one another, right? And so I'm in the DMV system, maybe under one name, but maybe I changed my name, and in the tax system, they don't know it yet, right? And so there are all these different systems that are interacting that may be displaying different information to me, and the different information might have a different result or outcome for me as a resident. And so something that we've prioritized is really creating integration across those systems and making sure that when a user does come to maybe do more than one service, that the system acknowledges that, and that the integrations with the back office systems are smart enough to know that this person has a boat and has a vehicle and maybe has a residence in this other location as well. I think the example that Bruce shared is highly relevant there too, of just knowing kind of what's going on across those disparate systems can really create a much more elegant experience in that things get woven together. I'll give an example in an environment where maybe somebody is renewing their vehicle registration with the DMV, but the tolling agency has a hold on their license, and they don't actually know this, and so they're running into problems with the DMV system. But if there's an opportunity for an integration with tolling, then that person is probably able to pay for both of those things at one time. And so again, it's making that elegant experience for a citizen who really wants to get their business done, right? They want to move on, they want to get to the kids' soccer game and take care of it, instead of running into the friction points of maybe not being eligible in one system and having to go to another system, or even having to go in person.
I think that's certainly one of those things that we talked about before, the experience being set by the private sector and what people do in their consumer life, where so much seems to be anticipated, and sometimes it's a little freaky that the companies we do business with know so much about us. It does draw a bright line sometimes, I think, when people are dealing with government and they feel like, well, if this company that I bought a rug from can know all these things about me, then why doesn't my government know more about me, and why is it so hard to connect the dots? So I think you raise an important part there, an important point, Jean.
Yeah, it's, Nordstrom telling me, hey, do you want this belt that matches the shoes you just ordered, right?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and it goes beyond retail. I mean, you've got your churches that are getting to know you and communicating the way they do and offering up things specific to your needs. I'll give you a perfect example that inspired me to really focus on this. Back in 2012, my son played lacrosse. I mean, that's a few years ago now. And you could go to their website, you could carpool with folks, you could order a shirt and then understand the schedule and make commitments through there. And that's what made me say, why can't we do that at a county level? And that's where I focused on for the last few years.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So Gene, based on your experience working with government, what are some of the elements of a successful implementation where you've seen this work out well? What things did they do? What are the kind of things you look for or help with that make an implementation go smoothly?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we like to do at the onset of an implementation is establish shared understandings around what we're seeking to achieve. Some government that they're focused on reducing the lines in their office. They want channel shift from people who are coming in person to go online. There are other agencies we work with who have really high call volume, and their goal is to drive down volume and to get people a smooth experience so that they aren't running into problems and having to make a call. And so those are just two examples. There are so many more I could offer, but I think really having an objective and an understanding of, okay, what do I want to accomplish here? And it might be multifaceted, right? It might be both, right? It might be more than one thing. And so I think having that kind of mindset going in and knowing what you're seeking to accomplish enables prioritization, and it enables focus in terms of what's important in the implementation. Is the most important thing that user experience for the resident, make sure that any legal jargon is cleaned up? Is the most important thing the reporting and the elements that enable your team to do proper reconciliation? All of these things can be the goals. And for most of our clients, I think that's what we see in terms of, several objectives, and we seek to accomplish all of them. But really knowing kind of what that is that you want to accomplish is important. I saw a question in the chat about fees for payments specifically, and this is something we get questions about all the time. We have both customers who pass on their fees to their residents and also the customers who absorb the fees themselves as a municipality. And I think, both of those options work really well. I think it's really a decision that the agency has to make, and in a lot of cases it's based on budget. But I think getting back to kind of what is important, in a lot of cases it is a cost savings element as well. And so that's why we want to have the flexible model where those fees can be passed on, and if every resident is just paying a tiny bit to have that service, in a lot of cases from a totality lens, like it's much cheaper to do it that way, right? We work with agencies who, the cost of keeping offices open could be $5, $10 per transaction, right? The cost of keeping the lights on and the PCI compliance of the in-person experience and the staff to keep the offices open can be very, very high. And so that's just another example of a goal where if a resident, ultimately is paying for the $5 to $10 per transaction through their tax dollars, and then paying, $1 to complete it online, that actually works out better for everyone and has a lot more efficiency. So to your question about implementations, it's all about what you want to accomplish and making sure that that's where the priorities are.
Can I chime in there?
Yeah, please, Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where providers like yourself, like PayIt and others that come in and have a good understanding of how to conduct those transactions. It's so important that we are able to focus on understanding the business needs and getting them to the systems that they need to conduct their business. Perfect example, you come into the county clerk, you decide to get a marriage license. While you're logged in there to understand that, it reminds you that your vehicle's registrations are due, and along with that, your child support while you're at it. Those are the different things that are disparate. The availabilities are disparate, and the ability to push that is challenging because we really don't know the individual. Getting to know the individual and establishing that trust where they'll share the information necessary is one of the hardest things. But once you show them that you're focused on their needs, and that's when you guys really take off. But every person's different.
So Bruce, how important are testing and integration and with service delivery partnership to a successful outcome for a project like this?
It's essential, and the hardest thing as a CIO that keeps you up at night is when it gets out of your control, right? You always knew that if it was in your data center, you could go down there and touch it and kick it or whatever you needed to get it back working. Here, you're dependent on the infrastructures, and we're talking about, again, phone lines still with modems connected all the way up to the expectations of the folks that have the most dynamic connectivity to their home. One thing that's interesting, you keep the roads working where a Model T can drive down it, but you also want to allow the Ferrari to get where he wants to go in a timely manner. So same with our systems. We've got to accommodate and make it available so that they can conduct the business necessary. So, I mean, that's how you get the portal up about them, and then let them dive deep if there's true business that needs to happen within the system of record or the system of transaction.
One of the questions that came in, Gene, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gene.
Oh, no, I was just going to echo something that Bruce said around, this conversion that everyone has kind of had to bear the burden of moving to the cloud. And some conversations are still about that, but it's not only that reliability element, right? It's also the security element. There's so much that goes into all of those things. And I think when you think about going back to kind of the fee model and the cost around it, maintaining servers and those kinds of things can be so cost prohibitive. And so, in many cases, moving towards a more modern solution really saves from those systems that you're having to bear the burden of the age around. I think the server example also touches on a question that someone asked around measuring trust. And I think, our experience with this has been people have trust in an environment where, systems or people do what they say they're going to do. And they also operate in an environment where people's experience is what they expect it to be, right? And so I think the areas of government where trust is degraded is where people are surprised or there's not the follow through that they expect. And so having the modern tech that can handle those situations and make sure that, oh, you know what, this person may not be eligible to do this one thing. Let's make sure it gives them the information on the things that they are eligible to do, right? So that it's always kind of guiding the person towards the next step in a way that doesn't drive cost or call volume for the agency.
Let's talk about trust a little bit more, because these systems, as amazing as they are only valuable if people will use them. So, Gene, how do you help governments introduce and promote new capabilities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and maybe the most fun part of all of this. I think for most of our customers, once the implementation is done and they get to promote the good work that their teams have done, that's a really exciting activity. That's a fun time. So, I think in government, we think about communications, right? Governments have communication teams. They don't have necessarily like a marketing team like a private company would. And so in working with their communications divisions, we can deploy assets across all of their communication channels. The example that you see here on the screen is at a bus stop in the city of Toronto, but there are so many ways to reach your residents. And I think this ties closely back to the human-centered design approach. Where do customers expect to run into this, right? Where do they need to know the information? When are they made aware that they owe something or that they need to apply for something? Or when do they discover that they need to apply for help, right? And having the resources available for them in those critical moments are the things that really drive the utilization that creates the ROI and the outcomes that you started out pursuing. And so, we have a team that works really closely with all of our clients, and, we'll try one thing with one customer and then, be able to share that across the customer base. But it's certainly a core part of our offering, and that it's really, like I said, probably the most fun part of it, because you get to celebrate the good work, and then it's where you see the amazing results. So, Making sure people are aware of things is a journey. It's not a destination, right? It's always, kind of repeat and make sure that that people know where to go every time. And having technology that serves that is really critical. So it's not only, hey, have a sign on a bus stop, but it's also, did they get that push notification this year that says, hey, do you still have this vehicle? It's up for renewal. Those kinds of things that that enable customers to really activate right away.
I agree with you. And I mean, along with once you let them know that they need to renew their license plate, you can push it to a cart as opposed to conducting that transaction and then going and paying your child support or putting your money down
right.
for a reservation at a park. All that's just like, I mean, I just bought something from Walmart today on the way home. There was third-party vendors, but at the end, I paid one transaction. And that's where county government needs to get. And that's where we have to address that mindset, both from our constituents and the folks that we work for in our business.
Absolutely. Delinquency is a problem that many of our agencies have initially that they seek to resolve. And a big part of delinquency we have found is ensuring that people know that they owe something. We ran an experiment with delinquency on one of our accounts, and what we heard back from the residents once they, got the email or got the notification or, were notified in whatever way made sense for them. The overwhelming majority of people who re-engaged, who responded, said, I had no idea that I owed, right? And it's because, a bill was delivered to their house and landed on the counter under the kid's artwork and, was never seen again. And I think that's really common for all of us. And so, making sure to catch those people where they are can drive real impact to the business where, collecting on delinquency can enable an agency to go, contribute to the building of a new library or a city park. There are real dollars associated with that and can make a real difference in the community.
And by keeping it within the systems, you're able to offer them incentives to go ahead and get rid of that delinquency and different things like that once
Right.
they're aware, as opposed to it just building up and causing more frustration and disappointment to your government.
Absolutely.
So Bruce, you used an interesting word there, aware. I mean, whenever government brings in a new system, there's need for people, internal government employees, to be aware, but there's also a need for constituents to be aware of the system, to be aware of the capability. How did you go about rolling out new systems to the public, to the constituencies in Harris County? How did you do that?
Well, just kind of stayed on the technology side there, Todd. We enabled the systems and brought it to the front of the sites and allowed them to start transacting. And it's amazing when you roll it out. There used to be a commercial a long time ago. It's where they rolled it out, and within 10 minutes they had 10 transactions, but within an hour they had 1,000 transactions and didn't know how they were going to make this up. That's where you have to create those soft rollouts to set the expectations for you to enable it and support it.
Well, one of the things that I think is most interesting about what Gene was talking about is the help that they provide in making constituents aware, making communities aware. You talked about the technology piece of it, and that's certainly an important part of it. But as something like this would roll out from a government to the community, who all on the government side needs to be involved? I mean, it's the technology people, yes, but who else is part of a successful rollout?
It's everybody. It's the business. It's the elected officials that are out in front of people. It's the departments that are conducting the business behind the scenes, and making sure a better understanding of this information's in the fingertips 24/7 of people that are using it now, as opposed to the old days when you would call and ask for a report or request a report and it was sent out in a PDF. It's current, accurate information for them to make decisions. A perfect example during Harvey, which I'm sure you're familiar with down here, we had flood gauges throughout. Before that, there was probably maybe 10,000 people that had signed up to it. We have over 1 million folks that are connected to that now, checking, well, of course, not now in the drought, but checking their flood gauges, checking what's going on in their area, both the streams and the roadways. And now that we've personified it and made it about them, we can actually give them their routes on their, their routes to work. They establish all that stuff, and we have a better understanding of them for us to be able to provide the information necessary. So.
Yeah, Bruce, communication within the agency is a critical piece of this. And then I think that translates, Todd, to back what you were saying, which is, ensuring that everyone has an understanding of what's going on and can promote it, right? And have that good positivity around it so that, when someone calls or when someone has a question, they can say, yep, this is how it works. This is why you can use it. This is why it's trusted. And so
Right.
I think to Bruce's point, not only is it internal comms across the teams, but it's making sure every element of that group knows their role in generating the success, right, of that program.
Well, that's essential. And I mean, we went to a different level on certain data around the justice area and the GIS area that the accountability is on the data set owner, the people that provide the data, all the way to a point where we had an MOU into the integrated group of understanding that, this is expected to be updated monthly if it's that way. This is on the hour. This is live and real. And that MOU was approved by Commissioner's Court and held those folks accountable for making sure that data is in the format that it's expected.
One of the things that I find most interesting, Gene, is just your ability to help with this kind of marketing plan, particularly in cities and counties, because in my experience as a local government CIO, technology doesn't really do communication well, and communications teams don't do technology well. So there's this internal disconnect. Everybody wants to do the right things, but they don't even really speak each other's language. And so that's why I think your ability to come and bridge that gap and to help with that, to bring some advice and some structure and some plans there is really a unique and important piece of all of this.
Well, look, we recognize that local government has, a ton of priorities, right? There's a lot to do. And so we want to make sure they have the assets that they need to be successful. And if that means that we can generate, social content, or we can make sure that their bill has the appropriate kind of formatting and way to draw, attention to the appropriate things, that's something we absolutely love to help with. And I think for people who don't get to spend a lot of time on those more creative things, it can, like I said, it's fun. It's a good way to celebrate an accomplishment and then, drive the results that you're looking for.
That's great. Now, before we move to the audience Q&A portion of this and a little more discussion, let's just talk a little bit. Tell us about some of the benefits that you've seen, that you've heard from your customers, how they have characterized their experience in this space with you.
Yeah, I mean, we got the question earlier about trust. And I think, when people have a positive experience, they are, more likely to engage and more likely to trust. And I think, local government also wants to be thoughtful about its brand. It wants to make sure that, its residency is engaged and is going to, respond in 311 if something happens. And I think an engaged community is statistically a safer community. And so, making sure to drive those engagements in a way and circle back to feedback and those kinds of things is a really important part of what we do. And it leads into, the service side of the business, right? It's like we've talked about, it's not all about technology. There's a change management element of digital transformation, in that not only are you managing the change management for your team, like Bruce was saying, the internal comms within the agency is so important, but it's also change management for the residents, right? It's helping them see to go somewhere else, and for that to be a really positive experience, and making sure that you capitalize on that moment where you have them to demonstrate, hey, we're moving forward with you. We're modern here. We're making sure things are secure, protecting your data, and making sure that your time is used wisely, engaging with the government.
Todd, you had a question come in about how do you measure the citizens' trust, and that's a great question. And the way that we've always measured it is the amount of use, the return customers, let's put it that way. And if we asked more questions to have a better understanding of them, that they actually respond and provide feedback. So it's a soft feel, but I mean, that's the way we did it from a technical perspective. And I don't know if you want to talk a little more about that, Gene, because you probably have tools that help you with that. But that's how we did it back in my day.
Yeah, I think, I mentioned like driving engagement and it being a positive experience is so critical. And then I think this is like the perfect kind of next statement in that when people are unhappy, they're way more likely to be vocal about it, right? They're way more likely to shout and say something. And I think making sure that those people have someone to reach who can help them. You mentioned the tools to support it. We offer a support team along with our technology services. So there's a team of folks who are trained on your services, and they, dedicated, answer the questions via email, chat, phone, to help support people when they need to. It's a really small percent of overall usership, but, we do it for a host of reasons that include, taking the burden off the agency, but also making sure that we have the information to better the product. I think recognizing that people who don't get what they need are going to, exacerbate the problem and make it worse, right? And so making sure that we can help all of those folks, make sure they get what they need. Even if it's not through our software, we get tons of questions that are not specific to the service that we offer. But enabling people with information and making sure they have what they need certainly helps the agency dial down on their phone calls, but also, enhance trust.
Right. I just want to chime in a little bit about, the services that are provided. Some of us, I know when I started the transition, I didn't understand or even know what to ask from a business perspective to see how we can enable a solution that touches the customer to make them have a better experience when they're here. Perfect example is we're pretty big. And, different things happen. We have a coastal part of our county. We have a rural part of our county. We have a lot of, Houston's here. So we have another 30 cities that are within our county. But what's interesting is when you get to the point of touching the individual and getting them what they need. A perfect example is we have dog parks. We didn't know there was a collie group. Now we have actual collie conventions or lassie conventions where we bring all the lassies together. And I mean, those are the kind of questions that you would have never known to ask. I remember when I was putting together the first CRM at BMC Software, we were, the sales guys were asking, for a golf ball column because they knew they wanted to take the right golf balls when they went to meet with them. It's the same thing here. What questions do we ask to get the information more pertinent to what the end user wants to, how they want to conduct business? And I think that's where you bring is a better business experience of what's going on in your other deployments and solutions that you've provided to guide us along the way. We always emphasize to our providers that we want to give you our needs, but sometimes we truly don't even know what our needs are.
That's a great point. And I want to just remind everybody now as we kind of move forward into the Q&A session of this, we've gotten some questions as we've gone along, and I think Gene and Bruce have done a good job of answering most of those anyway. If you have a question, please just insert it in the question box there, and we will get to as many as we can in the time that we have left. Gene, there is one that I want to start with now that's well, probably for you first, and then we can talk to Bruce and see what he thinks about it too. And that is there a way to phase an implementation of this system, or is it kind of an all or nothing thing?
Oh yes, we love phases. Actually, when we talk about our implementation with new customers, we talk about phases. We talk about what's most important to them, what's going to make the biggest impact. I think when folks try and do too much all at once, it grows scope, it grows risk, right? It grows the timeline as well. And so, our deployments are on average about 90 days. And we work really closely with our clients to figure out kind of what should that scope be. And most customers do one service at a time. Maybe they'll do two services at a time, depending on the size. And so I think phasing is a really smart thing to do. It enables you to move quickly, and it also, de-risks each project. And so definitely something we recommend.
Bruce, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a fun one, right? Because I mean, there's so much that touches the business processes and the integrations that you do on the technical side that you have to have straight before, it sounds bad, but expose your dirty laundry, because people will find it quickly when you give them the ability to make it about them. So you have to make sure the integrations are right. You have to make sure the people that support the systems are there. They have a better understanding of how people are going to use it. And all that has to be in place in line with what Gene said, as far as you launch these things or roll them out in a phased approach.
Yeah, something that we see every now and again, Bruce, to that end, is that if an agency has maybe like a data quality concern, or they feel like they don't want to expose certain elements of the data, like that can also be part of the phase of, okay, let's start with, simplify a little bit. Let's hold back on exposing this kind of information or the service that requires this piece of information, and kind of get it moving, so that, like you said, you de-risk yourself in terms of the things that maybe aren't ready, and still kind of make that progress. I think another example that we see is where folks need help with PCI, or they have a security concern and they want to start with just payments, right? And then they want to add the software on top of it. That's another thing that we see as well in terms of phases. And like I said, it really depends on the goals of the agency.
Okay, we got another question from the audience. Somebody wants, it's kind of a basic one. What's the biggest obstacle to digital transformation?
Who's that?
Who wants it?
I'll just use one word.
Bruce, what's the biggest obstacle? What was the biggest obstacle you saw to digital transformation?
I think it's the alignment, both internal and to our constituents. And when I say alignment, it's a better understanding and support, along with what Gene was saying as far as during the launches. You've got to have the people that are supporting the systems, that are providing the data, and reporting off of the business processes that are in place. They have to be aligned and have an understanding of why this is happening. If not, you don't get the support in the back end. It's just going to be a failure of a launch or of a system that no one's going to want to support or use.
Yeah, I was going to say buy-in. I think our most successful customers are really strong in terms of gaining buy-in across the organization. So alignment, buy-in, very similar answer, Bruce. Making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction, I think, is important.
And the other obstacle there is, this is how we've always done it. And there's a lot of challenges. I mean, it's not necessarily what's touching the constituents either. It can be an ERP system. It can be a justice system behind the scenes. Any of those things is getting these folks to understand that through automation, that they might free themselves up of what they've been doing for the last 20 years to be able to do something that's moving their agency forward, as opposed to just keep turning the lights on every day and running the report that was necessary to slide under somebody's door.
So we have another question here. With so much focus on hacking and identity theft, how can we convince our citizens systems like this are trustworthy? Bruce, you're an infrastructure guy. How do you go about that?
Well, first of all, from a technical perspective, you have to be convinced yourself. And I think the standards that are out there that are established by the federal government and just the industry is what's making us confident in the leadership in the IT industry to transition to that, along with convincing our business.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, make sure the folks that you're working with have what they need to demonstrate their competency in those areas, right? I think, and that ties exactly back to what Bruce is saying in that, there's PCI, there's ISO, there's SOC, there's all these different kinds of, there's NIST, right? So all of these different kind of compliance achievements that that providers are required to demonstrate are incredibly important because it's a signal to you of the strength of the infrastructure and or the software. It's also a strength or a signal of the strength around the team, right? Because a lot of the requirements in those things are around process and separation of duties and all of those things that you want to see happening. So I think making sure you're looking for people who have accomplished those things for long periods of time and have demonstrated success in those areas is what you as a government official can do to make sure your citizens are protected. And then in terms of, communicating with them, it's really about making sure they know that it's secure, that it has the right language around that to tell the story to the constituent. I think that goes back to some of what I said around a ton of legal jargon, right? I think when consumers see a lot of words they don't understand or a lot of legal jargon, that can lead to distrust. And so there's also like how you're communicating that to the residents.
And I think that's key for someone like PayIt and others is to report on that. I mean, I know that when I was CIO that, we had over 1 million attacks a day. I mean, that was so interesting to the stakeholders that we were protecting them and what we were doing to protect them. So it's okay for you guys to remind us that we're out there. We take for granted that it's all working and it's all seamless until it goes away. And then it instantly creates that distrust again. So it's important for you guys to let us know how the systems are doing.
Absolutely.
Well, we're getting pretty close on time. Unfortunately, we didn't get to all of the questions. We can follow up with people after the fact on that. But Jean, as we get ready to wrap this up, and before I make my closing comments, is there anything you'd like to say?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a lovely conversation.
Okay. Well, then I do want to be respectful of our time commitment. So we will wrap up here. In closing, I want to thank Jean and Bruce for sharing their insights on today's webcast. I also want to thank PayIt for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion today. And thank you to all of our audience for spending time with us. To access the certificate of attendance, please click on the certificate widget in the console menu. And we look forward to seeing you again at another government technology event. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.